Coming to Grand Rapids, Michigan on September 21st and 22nd is GrandCon Gaming and Comics Convention, presented by Celebration Cinemas. Join us in playing or chatting it up with fellow enthusiasts in a community that understands your passions. Get lost in the adventure of your favorite role-playing game. Admire costumes and art from vendors and attendees. Meet the creators behind your favorite mainstream and independent games and comic books. Check out unpublished games and sneak peek at things to come. You can get all this and more at GrandCon. For more information, please visit www.grand-con.com.
This week on Off the Cuff, I decided to stop being lazy and record an episode.
I'm back.
Yeah, we kind of delayed there for a few weeks, waiting for the stars to line up, and then Shanzi wasn't available to record, so we all decided to record a podcast without him. That's how that works.
Sucker.
Apparently, he's the only one that's expendable.
Oh, that's sad. Oh.
Sorry, Shanzi, but you're not here. As always, I am your host, Michael Powers. You heard Art Danner.
Hi.
And you heard Joe Reed.
Hello.
And as previously stated, Shanzi Brown is nowhere to be found.
It's for the best.
Let's just keep piling on. It's the pile on Shanzi hour.
This is going to be the best episode ever.
Oh, it is.
He's probably off somewhere doing motivational speaking. I'm living in a van down by the river.
No, he's working.
Okay, that's responsible.
All right, so since let's see, there hasn't been a whole lot of gaming stuff since the last time we recorded a podcast. I don't.
What are you talking about? Are you trying to say that nothing's happened or we're in the dead zone after E3?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't really think any of our opinions have changed, have they? Still feeling good on the PS4, and Microsoft just can't make up their mind.
Well, Microsoft backpedaled again today, so
yeah,
they do.
They are completely leaving things open-ended now for indie developers.
Self-publishing.
Self-publishing. They officially just are giving in absolutely everything that the fans want. So
pretty much everything the PS4 did out of the box, the Xbox One now does. So,
but they're still not ditching that Kinect.
Nope.
That's the only thing that they haven't done yet.
That's the thing that they have to do.
No, they don't have to do anything. We just have to not buy it.
Yep. Well, yeah. If they want me to buy it, that's what they have to do, and I won't buy it.
Or cut the cost so I don't feel like I'm paying for the Kinect. That's pretty much my only issue. Is I don't want to feel like I'm paying for something that I'm not going to use. So, in light of kind of a news-free era of after E3 stuff, we're just going to talk about how our gaming habits have changed from when we were younger to how we are now. And since this was Danner's idea, I just want to go ahead and hand this off to him.
Okay. Fantastic. I mean, I am the man with the plan here.
You are. most
have
of the
this
time.
completely scripted out, and this will go completely smoothly without any sort of issue whatsoever.
What's a script?
I don't know. Uh, I've heard TFG1 Mike mention scripts before, and Steve mentioned scripts before, but I myself don't remember what they are. And I went to film school, so never heard of the term before. So, anyways, so basically, the question I have raised is that I'm interested to see how, when you first really got into gaming, kind of what types of games you were into and what kind of gaming habits you had, and how those evolved or changed over the years with getting older and getting a life and that kind of stuff. um, I was gonna say, I mean, I guess the first question I would pose is, what games did you start off playing that are games that you don't really put that much stock into anymore, or something that you would have played when you were younger that you just now you don't really, you kind of avoid those types of games, or do you still play the exact same types of games that you played when you were a kid? Which I believe that's true for Joe.
Yep.
Well, for me, the lineage went. I had access to. I think it was an Atari 2600. Was my first experience with video games, and then the next door neighbor had an NES, and eventually I did, and then from there was the Super Nintendo, N64, PlayStation, PS2, to the 360 and PlayStation 3. But I guess my gaming habits have changed kind of in line with the way the consoles have changed. Like the 2600 and the NES and the Super NES, pretty much everything up to the latest hardware. All the games I played were massive single player games, like RPGs, some racing games here and there. Didn't really do a whole lot of first person shooter type stuff. It was all platformers and third person adventures. But just like an overall brushstroke before we dive into talking more in depth about it, though, is I think for me it's just now I prefer my games to be more social, but I don't know if that's just because that's all that infrastructure is built into the systems, or if it's because I have friends that are now on, they're all over the place. They're not down the street. They can't come over and sit on my couch and play. It's one of the selling points for me is a game that has some kind of multiplayer in it. Whereas before, without having that infrastructure in place, it didn't really matter to me if a game had multiplayer. I just wanted to sit down and play, like, Super Metroid, Chrono Trigger, Mario, those types of games. Where I could just play them by myself. I mean, I wasn't an antisocial kid by any means, but when it came time to play games, I wasn't really interested in playing them with anybody else. But Joe?
Yeah, I think my first video game experience, man, I had to have been about 2 or 3, but I played my uncle's Odyssey 2 in the upstairs bedroom of my grandma and grandpa's mobile home. And I remember being terrified of those weird little glowing sprites moving around on the screen. Beyond that, it was my mom's friend who had a ColecoVision playing Donkey Kong and Pitfall Harry. And I think maybe that's where it really started out. Most of my big video game memories, my early video game memories, are social experiences. It was playing with my Uncle Alan. It was playing with my mom's friend Lois and my mom with Pitfall Harry and Donkey Kong. And after that, I got my NES. And yeah, I played the big single-player games like Zelda, but there was lots of friends come over after school because I live 2 blocks from there, and we'd play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, the arcade game on the Nintendo, and every day after school we'd do the code to get infinite lives or 99 lives, and we'd beat the game every single day. And I remember also beating Dragon Warrior 1 in a basement full of other kids from school. We were all like getting into that last fight together. My friends were banging on the television, the little pink fingers banging on that glass tube, trying to score critical hits on them for me. And I mean, even further than that, N64 GoldenEye fests with everybody in the neighborhood coming over, four-player split screen combat. That was really, they really are all kind of social memories in my head. I don't really remember sitting there playing them alone, even though I know I did.
Well, I mean, I had the, you know, your cousins come over. I never really had the big, like, all the neighborhood kids coming over to my house to play anything. I think, like, I remember sitting around with my cousins and, you know, taking turns handing off the controller and stuff like that. But I think even on the N64, when multiplayer became like a real thing and not, you know, you need, you know, another add-on to get more controllers into the system, my only cooperative experience on that system is Mario Kart 64 and Star Fox 64. I mean, I played GoldenEye, but that wasn't my thing. I didn't get into first-person shooters anything until the current generation of systems, when that's all there was.
I think GoldenEye is why I can't get into other first-person shooters, because I'm weird. I haven't seen anything different from that, and I guess I take that back. I want to play some BioShock because it has, you know, a story and a couple other things, but I can't get into the first-person shooters because I look at it and it's a glorified GoldenEye.
Danner?
I was gonna say, I started off with the Atari 2600. I mean, mostly for me it was Qbert and Centipede when I first started playing.
Is that on 2600 Qbert?
Was it 20?
I don't know. I'm gonna go look in my bin. It's right here.
Then maybe I didn't have a 2600.
Lies.
It's all based on lies.
Speaking of the Atari, there's a game that I've heard about recently in a survival horror podcast that I want to see if Joe has, because I really want to try it.
What game is it?
I can't think of the name right now, but I will get it to you. I will find out what it is and talk to you about it this weekend.
If I don't have it, I will buy it. You won't talk to me this weekend because I'll be in Baltimore.
Oh, fine. You'll be in Baltimore. But I'll find out what it is.
Regardless, it was an Atari system. I know that much. So
It had a joystick and one button.
yes, I mean it was Qbert and Centipede. That's pretty much what I started on, and then I got a Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was pretty much Mario games, platformer games, Mighty Bomb Jack, Mega Man. So I mean, primarily platformers. When I was, younger, Super Nintendo came along, and that's, I think, when my gaming habits changed quite a bit, because of A Link to the Past, which was kind of like my. Well, I shouldn't say, with Nintendo, there was a lot of friends that had gaming systems that I had, and through them, I got to experience a lot of games that I would have normally played, mainly Final Fantasy. And when I got the Super Nintendo, that was kind of the big thing for me. That's what I purchased and actually owned my first Final Fantasy games. Before then, I just played them at a friend's house, and that kind of got me. I was still kind of big into platformers, but then I got big into the RPGs like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy 3 and Final Fantasy Mystic Quest and those games. The other thing that I think was big for me as well is growing up in a neighborhood where somebody's dad owns a pinball supply company that supplies pinball machines and arcade machines to all the local businesses. That's when we when we get home from school, we don't go, hang out and play games in somebody's room. We go over to Jeff's house. We play the Soul Blade machine that's, in his living room. Or we go to his room and play his Galaga or Miss Pac-Man tabletop game that's in his bedroom. Or we go to the garage where there's the Indiana Jones pinball machine, or where there's the Addams Family pinball machine, or where there's the Mars Attacks pinball machine, or the Terminator pinball machine, or where there's Street Fighter 2 Tournament Edition, or Mortal Kombat, and it's like it was like pinball and fighting games. Tons of arcade games, and literally that's what we did after school. We went over to Jeff's house, we played the arcade games for hours on end. No coin ups, didn't cost us any money. It was basically his dad, had us break in the machines so that they were good to go. I mean, we get to play these things brand new, never touched by another human being. We'd break them in so that the buttons weren't stiff anymore, and then once the buttons weren't stiff anymore, he would put them in a place somewhere, and rent them out to the local bowling alley or whatever. So I mean, that's my incredibly spoiled video gaming childhood. Was that? I mean, that's kind of a lot of how that was pretty much most of elementary, middle school, and high school was, I mean, always hanging out at Jeff's house, always playing video games. So, I mean, he had a Popeye machine down in his basement.
Ooh.
His dad, when Showbiz Pizza closed, got all the animatronic puppets. So all the animatronic puppets from Showbiz Pizza were lining the basement.
That's interesting. Those were all supposed to have been destroyed.
They so weren't, because there's a set of them. The entire Showbiz band is sitting in Jeff's dad's basement, along with all the animatronic hooves that were on the wall at the entrance.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, those are lining the basement also.
I knew a guy who worked at a Showbiz Pizza up on Alpine from the Showbiz to Chuck E. Cheese thing, and he said that the order came down from corporate that they were to take all those out and back, smash them with sledgehammers, photograph the destruction, and then send those photographs to corporate.
You could easily fake those, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so too.
And a lot of you gotta look at it this way though. When the Ann Arbor Showbiz Pizza closed, they did not switch to Chuck E. Cheese. They closed. So all those people had absolutely no obligation to do what corporate wanted them to do. So they made quick bucks, and they sold everything out of that place. So, I mean, they hightailed it and ran when that place closed down, and the managers there just gutted the place and sold off everything. So... when I was going to say, Jeff's dad bought a lot of the animatronic stuff out of there. So it was
awesome.
Pretty sweet. So, I mean, like when I was younger, not only did we play a lot of arcade fighters, I also tended to play a lot of fighters back then too, because that was our social gaming for us, was Mortal Kombat 2, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters. Rival Schools on the PlayStation was a big one for, I was going to say I think it was my last year of high school, first year of college. We played the shit out of Rival Schools, like to the point where we wore a ring into the game and had to buy a new copy. We were playing it so often. And then the thing with, like, for us, like, the fighting game thing kind of evolved because we kind of got out of the arcade fighters, and eventually we moved into ECW Anarchy Rules, WWF Warzone, and got into the slightly more technical fighting games, because it wasn't just mashing a bunch of button combinations. There actually was a little more, I guess that's not fair to say. There's a technique to fighting games. You need to learn the movesets. You need to learn the power moves. I was not one of those guys. Wrestling games are much easier for me because you hit a direction, you hit a certain button, and you perform a certain move, depending on where you're facing them. And for some reason, the sequences made sense to me like that, but button combinations didn't make any sense to me, and I just couldn't. For some reason, my brain didn't work that way that lent me to being good at arcade fighting style games. Just never was able to get into it. easily pick up a wrestling game and figure out, the techniques and the counters and stuff like that. That made sense to me, but for some reason, arcade fighters have never been something I can wrap my head around the button combinations for. Never been able to do it. And I think it's because of the fact that it requires so much sitting down and playing it just to get to know it that just bores the hell out of me. Just can't do it.
That's the biggest change I've noticed getting older is that I don't feel like I have the time to sit down and learn anything anymore, and it's really depressing because there's games that I want to play that I'm missing because I just don't want to sit down to learn them.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say I would say my biggest change in my gaming habits were the fact that I was so RPG heavy when I was younger. And I will say, probably up until the birth of my kids, I played RPGs. And then the moment they arrived, I just didn't have the time to pour into it. And I don't have the time to devote to 130 hours to a game.
How the heck did we fit in Fallout? You and I both did that.
The only explanation I have is I was unemployed when Fallout came out. That was the only explanation because I think I lost my job the day Fallout 3 came out. Because that was the last game I really bought. I don't even think I bought it. I think I borrowed it for somebody. And then eventually I did buy it. But I sunk so much time. You could easily say I've sunk probably 180 hours, maybe 140, probably somewhere between 140 and 180. It's in there. With all the expansion packs and everything, I sunk a ton of time into that game. But I want to say that's probably the last game I've really sunk a ton of time into. And yeah, I was gonna say, I think that's the biggest gaming change for me is the fact that I used to be so heavily into RPGs, and then just RPGs gave way to first-person shooters and to action games, just because they were easier to pick up and play and put down again, and not feel like you're really missing out on some super involved storyline.
Unless it's Assassin's Creed or Infamous.
Those are easy enough to pick up and put down and come back to. Though.
I can't pick up. I have to, when I start Infamous, I have to play through to the end. Otherwise,
except for Uncharted,
I forget it because Infamous has such a unique control scheme. It doesn't play like anything else. The one thing I've noticed, in listening to you guys describe like the gaming when you were kids, is that and I'm slowly starting to remember certain things about my childhood that I would rather forget. Is that although I was an average student, that was not good enough for my parents. So I was perpetually grounded all through the school year. Plus, I lived in a subdivision like on the opposite side of town from a school. So it wasn't like I got to walk home from school with a group of kids and go to someone's house and play video games. It was you ride the bus home, you come home, and you are grounded. However, the one thing I also am trying to realize is how weird my parents were about my grounding. While I was grounded from going outside and playing with my friends, they always made sure that they bought me the NES, they bought me the Super Nintendo, they bought me my games. But it was you're grounded, but here's some games to play. So I never really had the social experiences that you guys are talking about, which is probably like it got my life got a little easier about around the time the N64 came out. That's probably why I started doing a lot of group stuff, playing with that. But my first introduction to I never understood RPGs. I watched my cousin play Final Fantasy 3, which is, Final Fantasy 6. I never got it. I couldn't, I was like, this just seems so boring to me what you're doing. You're not in it at all. It's kind of like the way Allie looks at those games right now. It's like what's weird about that is she can play Pokemon, but she can't play a role-playing game. But I didn't get into RPGs or anything that heavy until Chrono Trigger. That was like my gateway drug. And that
still
led
the
to
only RPG I can play.
I could still play that one today too. I think that's one of the only games that I can pick up and play, 20 years later almost now. Um, and I don't know, I don't have those wonderful, fantastic childhood experiences that you guys do. Um, what's
I don't want to say that they were all fantastic.
well, but I never got with a group of guys and
one
went
of
to
my
an arcade
birthdays,
or
my
anything like
parents
that.
did buy me Jurassic Park for Super Nintendo, and that wasn't super stellar. So
Sorry.
I had something and I forgot what it was, but I can remember the other thing. I guess if we just want to kind of keep it rolling, what was the longest time you guys went without playing games? Is there like a period in your life where you either had like a significant other or job or anything that just got in the way where you didn't buy a game, play a game, you didn't follow gaming?
Right now. And I say that and I'm not kidding. And it depresses the snot out of me because I want to be playing something right now. I have the time. I have a couple of free days a week when I'm not painting my house that I'd like to be sitting in front of the television playing a game, but it's like my sensibilities have changed. So this is a very appropriate topic for me right now because I want to play something, but I can't find anything I want to play. I ended up picking up SimCity Creator for the DS, which has filled a small part of that hole, but my God, I'd be willing to drop $30 on something awesome right now if I could find out what it is I wanted. I mean, back in the old days, I guess my biggest memories are of those social people coming over and playing games, but probably I think during the Super Nintendo when I had the subscription to Nintendo Power, so I knew about the new technology, weird things that were on the horizon. So when they announced the FX chip and 3D or three-dimensional gaming, three-dimensional things, I said, "Ooh, I'm going to buy that game because it's the first thing with 3D stuff in it." And I bought Donkey Kong because it was computer-generated critters, and the first time they've done that. And the Rumble Pack came out, and I bought, oh God, what was
Star
the
Fox.
first Rumble Pack game? Star Fox, yeah, that awesome game. Whenever Nintendo did something first, I went and got it, and that's really where my collecting started. Was with Nintendo collecting the firsts, and that developed, and that really drove my playing and my habits for a very long time. But yeah, just nowadays with Nintendo, I don't need to go get that new Mario game because it's either a rehash or something that's so different I don't care. And how do you dance that line between too similar and totally different? I don't know how different enough to be exciting, but similar enough to still care about it.
Oh, the last Mario game I cared about was Mario 64.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
The
Mario
last Mario
Sunshine
game, I
was
think-
okay.
See, I like Sunshine a lot.
I don't hate it, and I really loved the weird platforming levels that happened in Mario Galaxy. Those were fun. I didn't exactly care too much for the rest of the game, but
I was gonna say, I think the last Mario game I really cared for was Super Mario World because I played
that was good.
snot out of that game. I love that game. That was one of the two games on that system that I just played. Actually, one of the 4 games on that system I played just the crap out of. Mega Man X,
Oh yeah,
Super Mario World, Final Fantasy 3, or nowadays known as
6.
Final Fantasy 6, and I think Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Which, if you aren't familiar with Mystic Quest, it's like the beginner's RPG. It was like they made a dumbed down version of Final Fantasy for people that had never played RPGs before, and it was kind of like for younger kids, like an intro to RPGs essentially.
Huh.
It's a fun game, and it's for people who've never really played in RPGs. It was a pretty brilliant idea. It was just a 2-party system instead of Final Fantasy can get a little heavy sometimes, where some of the games you can have like 8 people in your party at any given time in some of the games. Most of the times it's 4. But
So, have you had any droughts, Danner?
that's what I was trying to remember. Like I could specifically remember my droughts in like comic books and where I kind of stopped paying attention to like comics, but I don't recall a time that I've ever really stopped paying attention to what's been going on in video gaming. I'm like, like the older I got, the more hyper aware I became of things, as everything was so like narrow for me when I started out, because it was just like, I have a Nintendo, so this is the only thing I care about right now. When I got my original NES system, I mean, I immediately got a subscription in Nintendo Power, and read Nintendo Power, I mean, up until pretty much the day I got rid of my Super Nintendo before the PlayStation came out.
I never thought to ask. Do you have any of your old Nintendo Powers?
I would have to check with my parents because I don't think I kept any of them, but that's not to say that there aren't any at my parents' house.
I do. I have a whole box of them in the garage.
Buy them from...
And I was going to say, and for me, it's kind of like, the best way I could also, kind of compare it to is with, much like with comics. I was a guy that was very much I wasn't aware of the writers, I wasn't aware of the artists, I cared more about the characters. I've always cared more about the characters. I was never loyal to any particular company. I've never claimed to be loyal to any particular company. I've liked particular companies' systems over other companies, but I was loyal to characters or to franchises. And for me, my tenure with Nintendo ended because of the fact that Final Fantasy moved to the Sony systems. The moment the PlayStation came out and they announced the Final Fantasy VII was going to be on the PlayStation, I jumped to Sony.
I think I might have it, but Joe, do you have the Nintendo Power that has Final Fantasy VII on the Super Nintendo or the N64?
No, that would be awesome.
I have that. I think I can find it.
I'd like to find out what issue that I have. A lot of them. I don't know what issue that one is, but I wouldn't be surprised if I have it. I'd like to go see that.
It looked like a completely different game. Like I think it was, if I remember correctly, the photo they showed was it was like you were going to play it was going to be a first person game. So you were actually playing as one of the characters in first person, and then you had your other, I think there are 3 other party members because you were the camera. And obviously that's not how Final Fantasy VII is.
Yeah.
Danner, like you, I followed. I jumped when Final Fantasy VII was announced for the PlayStation as well.
Yeah, and I mean that was legitimately Final Fantasy VII is the only reason I even jumped systems. I was big enough into Final Fantasy VI had such an impact on me because of how well thought out it was, how interesting the characters were, how well the story developed, and how everything just flowed. It was one of those games I had never played anything like that up until that point, and it just impacted me so much as a young gamer that I was like, this is my series. I was like, this is the one thing that I hold above all else. And that was the deciding factor for me. There just wasn't any. There was absolutely zero deciding factor outside of the fact of Final Fantasy. That was my deciding factor. That was the pony I backed. And because continuing forward, that's why I got a PlayStation 2 at launch. Was the fact that I knew Sony was continuing that partnership with Square Enix, or Squaresoft at the time, and I continued to continue to support the Sony systems because of the fact that I knew Final Fantasy was on there, and I much like other people, I enjoyed Final Fantasy VII. I liked Final Fantasy VIII more than I liked Final Fantasy VII, and I liked Final Fantasy IX more than I liked 7 or I liked 8.
I love 9.
I love 9 too. I don't think it gets the recognition that it deserves, and I liked 8 because I liked the whole Gunblade dynamic, which some people love it or hate it. Now, what cured me of my obsession with Final Fantasy would be Final Fantasy X. That was pretty much when that game, the moment Final Fantasy X completely failed me, I bought an Xbox. And then shortly after that, I bought a GameCube. And that generation was the first generation where I owned all the systems. It was the first time that happened for me. It was also the first time, I had gone back to Nintendo. It was N64 was the only system in that period time for Nintendo I'd never played. I played it when I went over to my cousin's house. I realized I played so much GoldenEye over at people's houses that when I picked it up recently, I realized I've played the entire game. And I didn't realize I played it that much at other people's houses, but surprisingly enough, I guess I had. Same thing with Mario 64. Never owned the game, but I played it so much at my cousin's that I didn't really need to play it anymore. And then, when I was always a big Legend of Zelda fan because I still hold A Link to the Past as one of the greatest games of all time, in my opinion. I love that game. I love pretty much all the top-down style Zeldas that are like that. I like the Game Boy Advance ones. And it's pretty much the Game Boy Advance ones. Or the Game Boy Color ones, like Seasons and Colors. But I played, which I'll catch some flack for this, I'm sure. Not from you guys though. But I played what's the name of the game? Legend of Zelda. What was the N64 one?
Majora's Mask?
Not Majora's Mask.
It's just Legend of Zelda. Oh yeah.
Ocarina of Time. I played Ocarina of Time on the GameCube when I pre-ordered Wind Waker.
On that was such a pain in the neck.
And I gotta say, I've never been so bored and disinterested with a Zelda game in my entire life, and I know some people hold it as probably one of the greatest things since sliced bread. I find the Ocarina of Time to be the low point of the entire series. For me. I've also never played Majora's Mask, so that may not be completely true. I might find that to be the lowest thing of the entire series, but I've heard good things about that. But I also hear a ton of good things about Ocarina of Time. I just don't see it. I don't get it.
I wonder if that's one of those things where right place, right time, right controller.
And I think that has to be it. But I played it over at my cousin's house, and I still couldn't get into it there. I was like, I didn't see what the big deal was. It felt clunky to me. It didn't feel, and it could have been the fact that I was so far into the Final Fantasy hole at that time that I just couldn't get with an action RPG because I was so used to the turn-based at that point in time, because that was like the only thing I was playing at that point in time. Which isn't completely true because I was playing Vagrant Story also.
It's a beautiful game, beautiful story. But it can't be played with the GameCube controller. The music stuff that it relied on those C buttons. But I think right time has a lot to do with it too. I don't believe that Ocarina of Time holds up as well as we all think it does. And I don't think
I could still sit down and play Link to the Past all the way through.
Oh yeah,
but I think that's one of those. I think that goes back to being able to replay Chrono Trigger. I think that is an advantage.
Chrono Trigger also completely replayable.
Well, but I think what that is the there's probably another word for this, but the pixel art is a lot easier to deal with playing an older game than it is to play something that was made in 3D.
With horrible anti-aliasing.
Yes, like that's what I'm saying. Like those, like the pixel art is always going to look the same, pretty much, unless like the DS and Nintendo's like handhelds are like perfect for playing those old games. Like Chrono Trigger looks amazing on the DS, and I'd imagine a Link to the A Link to the Past would as well. But like
Chrono Trigger looks good on the Vita too.
the old stuff doesn't it doesn't stack up. You know, it won't look good.
And I think there's something about that Super Nintendo generation of games that I think those graphics translate better to. I think it's still an art style that's kind of held onto by a lot of the independent game companies and indie game companies because it looks good and it looks polished and it still looks good on screens today. Where, I mean, I think if they started doing like designing everything in a way that, you know, the N64 did with the blocky character designs, I probably wouldn't have as much love for indie games as I do now. I think it's just they embrace that Super Nintendo era graphic style because of the fact that it's easy to program for on like tablets and handhelds and stuff like that, and that kind of graphics interface is kind of embraced a little bit more in what we're seeing on those types of portable handheld tablet and phone systems, and that kind of art style is still embraced because it's cartoony, but it looks good still.
That said, I can't play Chrono Trigger on my TV. I can't.
I can play it on my Vita.
Yeah,
I can't imagine I'd be able to sit down and play it on my TV either.
But for me, that's a matter of that's a graphical issue. I don't want to see the sprites that big, whereas the sprites are nice and small and actually looked really good on the DS on the Vita.
I would love a copy of Chrono Trigger to play on the big TV just to see. I don't have a way to get it on a big screen right now. Only the DS version.
Well, you can get the PlayStation version on your PS3. And if Danner bought it, you can download it.
Yeah, you could just jump on my account and download it.
It's the PlayStation version, which means it's going to play horribly, but
it'll give you a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't even remember.
So no drought. Ever.
I don't like. I can't recall one. I mean, I don't. I want to say that there's, like that was my thing to do in like middle school and high school. When you got to the end of the day, I had a monitor and my video game system like built onto a shelf that literally went over the edge of my bed. So I would pop into bed, play for like a half an hour, 45 minutes before bed, and then go to sleep. I mean, it was always that. I always had a TV and a video game system directly in my room, always. So it was one of those things. It was always there, and I never would. I can't think of a time where it didn't.
Where you weren't in it.
Where I wasn't like. I mean, there's times where it's like I may not like now. I think I follow stuff a little more closely, but I don't sit around and read the magazines like I used to when I was a kid. I mean, I don't think a printed form of I don't think there is currently a printed form of video game media that I think is worth sitting down and wasting my time reading. Unfortunately, I think Game Informer is a joke because of working at GameStop, and with Best Buy's Gamer magazine, I literally pick it up and I look at the coupons, and then I'll flip through and see if there's anything remotely interesting. Usually by the time I get a paragraph into an article I find interesting, I was like, these guys are fucking retarded, and then I'm done. I just don't. I know you digest most of your information through like podcasts.
Podcasts, Twitter.
And Twitter. And I was going to say, most of my information I get through Twitter, or I'll go to GameSpot and just check out, whatever, titles to articles, fancy me, but I was like, I won't go out and seek out information. If it comes across me, I'll read it. But it's like I don't know if it's something. If it involves a company I'm interested in, or if it involves a game franchise I'm interested in, I'll sit down and read it. But I won't just sit to flip through crap just because I don't have the time, and I'm just not. I'm interested in essentially. I guess what it comes down to, I'm interested in stuff that I'm interested in, and I'm not going to go out and seek out new shit. I guess is what it really comes down to. And it's just
my problem with print media is by the time I have a copy of it in my hand, that news is a month old, and I saw it on the internet.
Exactly, and it's kind of gotten to the point where it's kind of a joke. Print media is because the moment I get like a gamer magazine from Best Buy, it's the reviews feel so old to me, and it was like, it released like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but it was like I've read like 5 articles about this online already. It's like this is old hat to me. I mean, literally the only reason I even get that is because in the hopes of getting a decent coupon once a month, and it's been a good 3 months since there's been a decent coupon in that magazine.
Well, for me, I remember I used to see when I worked at Blockbuster back in 2000. I used to buy Electronic Gaming Monthly and the PlayStation Magazine monthly from them. I never had a subscription to it, never. And I also bought Next Gen, and I don't know, there's like 3 or 4 different video game magazines I was buying monthly off of the newsstand, and I would digest everything about them. And really, I would really follow games, and that I actually pretty much did up until about like late 2003, early 2004, and then my gaming just stopped. And I think that's because I spent a lot of time in my car driving back and forth across the state to visit friends and go to school and visit girlfriends and stuff like that. And that was like almost a 2-year period where I didn't buy a single game. I remember the Xbox 360 announcement came and went, and I didn't even know it. In fact, I wouldn't even have been aware of the Xbox 360 if it wasn't for working at Cinemark with Danner. And I remember vaguely following anything having to do with like the PS3 and stuff like that, but like nothing until I moved back home and I started hanging out with Jason again. And when I moved back home, I found myself, flush with cash with the job I have now, and was like, I'm gonna buy a new TV. So I went and bought a new TV, and I hooked up my PlayStation 2 to it, and it looked like ass. And I was like, and I tried. I went out and bought component cables for it, and I was like, you know what? No, we have to do something. And it was 2006. So that's when the PS3 was coming out. The 360 had been out for a year, and on Black Friday, I went and got the 20 gig 360 with Gears of War and NHL 07 with like a 3-year warranty from Circuit City for like $250. And I took that home, and that's really the only reason I even bought a 360 was because it was cheaper than the PlayStation 3 and it was HD. And I bought it with the intention of, I'm never going to use the online stuff. That's stupid, blah, blah, blah. And then Danner had to go and have a kid. And somehow I got invited to that diaper party, and I'm not entirely sure how I did. I keep trying to figure that one out. But basically, I went out there and I played, Gears of War and Call of Duty 2. And I came home and signed up for Xbox Live the minute I got home.
Wow, dude, I was at that party. That was before I knew you, and I don't remember meeting you at all. You were one of those people I didn't know.
Same, likewise.
Amazing.
But there was really a 2-year period where I didn't buy a single magazine, nothing. And when I moved back home, I dove headlong back into it because I was working like doubles and stuff at the movie theater, and I didn't have internet on the phone wasn't a thing. at the time, and so it was like every Saturday I go into on my way into work, I go into the grocery store, and I had like a path that I followed, and it was like, okay, I'm going down the magazine aisle. Is there a new Electronic Gaming Monthly? No. Is there a new PlayStation magazine? Yes. Buy it. Get to the store. I'd read that thing cover to cover, in half my shift, and then I'd start watching my TV shows and stuff like that. But yeah, magazines have pretty much gone away. The print media, I kind of I watched that dissolve. Because at that same time I was listening to a lot of the podcasts that OneUp.com was putting out, and they have a lot of good ones. And it kind of felt like, and at that time, I didn't really have a lot of people to talk about games with. When I started getting into it again, I mean, Jason, liked to talk about games, but he more or less would react to what I told him about stuff, and so I got to listen to other people talk about it and read their reviews in the magazines. So it was kind of like, it was weird to have like this. I've been listening to these guys talk about video games for like 7 years, 8 years almost. So like I know like who has similar tastes to mine and who doesn't, and they became my gaming friends when I didn't have gaming friends. But yeah, that was my the drought that I had, and I've pretty much been in it, and I've since, and I've kind of kept myself in everything, and slowly I've started to thin out where I actually go for my sources. I don't really go to look for it anymore. If it shows up across my Twitter feed and I'm able to like catch it, maybe I'll check it out and stuff like that. But so at what point in your gaming life, and I think Danner kind of answered this with him, but we'll see what Joe says. At what point did you become? Because like we said, at first we were all about Nintendo, because Nintendo Power was telling us what we should buy, what we should play, what was the new hotness. School chat about what game was cool, and Danner brought up the fact that it was all about the game, the title, the franchise, the characters,
exclusives.
At what point did you become aware of at what point did a studio matter to you more than the game, or did you become more aware of the studio or publisher than the game? Like for Danner, for example, I think his was Squaresoft with the Final Fantasy series. When Square jumped from Nintendo to the PlayStation, he followed them. Do you have a moment like that, Joe?
I was loyal to Nintendo for a very long time, and when I'd go over to the friend's house who had the Sega or who had the games on their Nintendos that weren't made by Nintendo, the weird little things that were different and annoying stood out to me and annoyed me. The way menus work for Nintendo branded games were beautiful, and it worked, and it functioned, and the buttons did the same things from game to game, and you could kind of follow it, and the graphics were consistent, and you'd go to these other things, and the play control felt weird with the Sega Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog. I never liked the way Sonic responded to the controller, or how he couldn't jump walking slowly going up a hill. He'd jump back, that weird little stuff.
It's something always felt terrible about the Sega games to me. ToeJam and Sonic the Hedgehog, and
and I developed such a taste.
TurboGrafx 16.
That's one of the reasons I want to get that Ninja Turtles game that was ported to Sega. I want to see how that plays compared to the Super Nintendo version. Hyperstone Heist.
The one thing I never got about the Sega was the button layout. The 3 buttons that never clicked with me.
And that's something where Nintendo also always, I think, even that weird, ugly N64 controller, that thing's functional.
I love the N64 controller.
It fits. It's beautiful. And so I had all this loyalty built up, and the Xbox is coming out, and the PlayStation 2 is coming out, and the graphics on the PS2 were hideous compared to what I was playing on on thing. Wait, I'm jumping a generation. GameCube, I guess. Even then, I liked what they were doing, and when I got the job at GameStop, I started becoming aware of more developers and what things were going on. But it didn't matter because I still like Nintendo. And when the Wii came out, I think that's really when gaming started to die for me, because the thing that I had grown up with was starting to change. It wasn't catering to me anymore. The care and love that I saw going into Nintendo branded games started to disappear and turn into shovelware, quickly hashed together garbage. And I honestly, Art, I think the diaper party and me playing Gears of War and finding out that I was like a prodigy at it was probably the moment where I started to consider Xbox and the other things, and also those parties that James used to have at his house, the Halo LAN parties. Before there was real internet and everybody had it, we'd all network cable those things together. Those were transformative moments where I'm like, wow, this is actually kind of cool. I changed there, but even then, Nintendo died for me, and I really don't enjoy those Halo type, Gears of War type games. There's, you know, the single player stuff is missing that I used to get from other places. And I want to play a game.
So, Dan, was your Squaresoft?
I think Square was the first time I really. No, I want to say Hudson Soft was probably the first time I really paid attention to a game company back on the Nintendo, because I was for some reason very much aware of what they were doing, and I have no idea why. Hudson Soft really stuck out in my mind, but they did. But I would say Square is probably one of the ones where I became, really into what they were doing and very loyal to them, and more so over Nintendo or Sony. But I think outside of that, I think I've become more and more company focused. The longer I have far more loyalty towards certain game developers than I do towards the systems, especially BioWare. BioWare would definitely be this generation's. I would go as far as back to say once I felt completely burned by Square after Final Fantasy X, I think BioWare was there. It was that company that I kind of latched onto after that with Knights of the Old Republic, and they were just kind of that company that I think I just started to pay a lot of attention to. There was other companies I paid attention to over the years, but I think it's more so because
Rare.
of personalities. I've never paid much attention to Rare. So, I paid a lot of attention to. Crap! I can see their logo in my mind, and I just can't. Cliff Bleszinski. Epic. I started to get, kind of behind, Epic and id and
Bethesda
and those companies, and High Moon
Tim Schafer.
High Moon Studios on the Xbox with, whatever the hell game they did, Dark Watch. And Capcom. Capcom's iconic to me. There's certain companies, yes, you're always aware that they're going to be there.
But did you know
just EA and Capcom and are just staples of the industry, so you're always aware of them, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I follow everything that they do.
You didn't buy Mega Man because it was a Capcom game. You bought Mega Man because it was Mega Man.
Mega Man.
Right.
But I bought Final Fantasy because I love Final Fantasy, but because I liked Final Fantasy, I liked Square, and I bought Vagrant Story. I bought Legend of Dragoon. I bought, those types of games that came from Square.
Legend of Dragoon was Sony, not Square.
Well, fuck you. The moment I said it, I knew I was wrong. So that's fine.
The reason you know it wasn't Square is because it's not Final Fantasy.
Yeah. Vagrant Story was Square. That one I know for sure was Square.
Yes.
But I mean, there was certain RPGs that Square put out, and I mean, I bought the Bouncer because it was a Square title.
Oh man.
I played that thing like 12 times because it was short. um, but it was a terrible game. I can acknowledge that now, that it was a terrible game, and I kept playing it over and over and over again in the hopes that I was going to get something out of it that was never
Is
coming.
it better than that Guys? That fighting game, the Square fighting game?
Energizen?
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
Okay.
Energize or Energizen?
It looks like it's supposed to be Energize or Energizen, but I swear it's like Guys or something stupid.
Probably.
It's like EHR.
No, I fell in that trap and go, ooh, Sephiroth and Cloud's in it. I'll buy it.
Yeah, so did
And
I.
yeah, it was dumb. So, just like Final Fantasy X wasn't bad enough. Let's try Final Fantasy X2. Oh my god, what is this? It's Barbie dress up Final. That was the only game I bought it the day it came out and sold it back to GameStop by the end of the day. Like I spent 3 hours with the game and I went, fuck it, I'm done. I can't do this.
Well,
This is terrible.
for me, I was in the same boat as you, Danner. It was Squaresoft was the first developer or publisher that I became aware of. But even before that, I think the name that I knew before was Rare, because they sent out those Treehouse videos.
Yeah.
And Nintendo made that big push. It was kind of like it was very hard not to know who Rare was if you were a Nintendo fan.
One of my favorite things that happened with Rare was, because of Nintendo Power, I knew that all of the people who made Rare what it was, Ken Lobb and oh God, I can't. He's the only name that's coming to head now. But either way, a lot of those guys who made GoldenEye and who did the Donkey Kong stuff and who did the Perfect Dark stuff, they had left that company. And when the announcement got made that Rare was going to Microsoft, everybody was like, "Oh my God, Rare is going away! Oh, it's going to Microsoft! I can't believe what they're doing to Nintendo!" And the whole time I'm going, Nintendo knows what's going on. They saw Rare going downhill and got rid of it when everybody still thought it was awesome, and they got the better end of that deal by letting them go because a lot of garbage came out after those guys left and it went to Microsoft, unfortunately.
But it was I was one of those guys because I was not aware of Free Radical.
Free Radical.
For me, it was Squaresoft, and what got me hooked on Squaresoft, like I said, was my window to RPGs, which was Chrono Trigger, and it's mainly because I like the setting. I love the time travel, I love the futuristic aspects, all that stuff. And one of the things that made me jump ship, I said that I never got the appeal of Final Fantasy VI. Still haven't played Final Fantasy VI. Don't want to play Final Fantasy VI.
Not for everybody.
I'm not going to knock it because it's up there for me. It's up there with Resident Evil. I understand and Zelda. I know what those franchises have done for gaming. I'm just not going to play it.
And the best way I could describe Final Fantasy VI now, and I don't know why I just thought about this, Final Fantasy VI is like the fringe of Final Fantasy games because it deals with two alternative realities. So if that doesn't intrigue you at all, then go fuck yourself.
See, I didn't get that watching my cousin play it at all. But like I said, I didn't play it, so that's probably why I didn't pick that up. And one of the things that maybe I followed Square when they announced Final Fantasy VII because I probably, like a lot of other people, saw that first picture of Cloud with his sword on the motorcycle, and I was like, "Holy crap! Motorcycles in a Final Fantasy game, I'm there." Like I like the high tech vibe that they put in the opening of Final Fantasy VII and all the stuff that they showed for it. I was like, I'm sold. I mean, that was one of the games I bought that I bought the game when it came out that September, 3 months before I even got a PlayStation. I had a memory card before I had a PlayStation. I was ready to go Christmas Day because I had the game and the memory card. I just didn't have a way of playing it until then. And I followed Square wholeheartedly in right up until it was shortly after the PS2 came out, and it became very apparent to me that obviously from a business standpoint, I understand why they did it, but from a gamer And from a guy that liked Secret of Mana, that liked Chrono Trigger, that liked Xenogears, even kind of liked Vagrant Story, Square was switching into this mode where it was like, if we're going to sell it, it's going to have Final Fantasy in front of it. And I did not like that at all. I felt like there were games like Kingdom Hearts. I like Kingdom Hearts, but Kingdom Hearts is a 3D version of Secret of Mana or the Mana series. Like that's what that is to me, and it almost feels like a travesty that we never got a Secret of a Mana game that was as good as the Kingdom Hearts games. And when they decided to let the team that made Xenogears go or fall apart, so they formed Monolith Soft, I was like, okay, so we're not going to get Xenogears 1 through 4, so screw you, I don't really care about this. And then they did Final Fantasy X, and then they did X2, and I was like, oh, now you're making sequels of your own damn games. I'm done. And I mean, in that period, I became aware of other studios like Rockstar for Grand Theft Auto, and I think Retro Studios with Metroid Prime.
Yeah.
I became aware of them.
What else did they do?
Well, now they've done nothing else except that I know of, other than the most recent Donkey Kong games. But that's when I really started getting into following. It became more important to me who was making the game rather than what the game actually was, because it was kind of like it's weird. This is kind of like a weird. I'm not saying this would actually happen, but I'm saying like, okay, if Rockstar all of a sudden just up and said they wanted to make a My Little Pony game, just saying, I would probably try it, because it's Rockstar making a My Little Pony game. It's kind of like, it's also the same thing of saying, like, Dana brought up High Moon Studios. It's okay, High Moon, they make the Transformers games. Not a big Transformers fan, but High Moon, has a good reputation, so I'll try out their Transformers games. And look, they made a good game. 2 of them.
Those were fun.
Same thing can be said for Bizarre Studios, the guys that started, I could be wrong, but didn't they get their start making Geometry Wars and Project Gotham?
Yeah.
And it was Geometry Wars that sold me on them, and because of that, I bought Blur. Love Blur. I wish I played more of it, but it's just, nowadays it's more about who's making it rather than what the game actually is. And I get really ticked off. I'm starting to get more ticked off by publishers more and more. Because they closed a studio because the game didn't sell 12 million copies. Whatever.
It's a terrible trend.
At least we're getting Tomb Raider 2.
Yay!
Hey guys, there's breaking news. Legend of Zelda Symphony of the Goddess live concert at DeVos Hall is coming to Grand Rapids.
Oh. What?
Yep, I'm looking at it right now.
When are we going?
Let's find out. Oh God, no dates? The frick, dude? Oh wait, here. Okay. Mezzanine. Oh, I want to buy tickets anyway.
No dates.
Not yet, but I'm looking.
I don't know. This has been a great discussion. I think we should continue this again.
Maybe with Shanzi.
Yeah.
October
But this will
19th.
suck. October 19th. Is that when we're doing our next podcast?
October 19th is our next podcast. So until then, if you want to get in touch with us, you can comment on our parent site at geekcastradio.com or send us emails to us at feedback@geekcastradio.com. Just put the show title in the subject line. So for this week's Off the Cuff, I've been Michael Powers. You can find me on Twitter, Xbox Live, and the PlayStation Network at BoothNinja81. Danner?
You can find me on Twitter at rdanner and on PlayStation Network at X51 the Machine Man. If you find me on Xbox Live, that's a joke you want.
Joe?
I've been Joe Reed, and you can find me, probably the best way is through Facebook still, at the Geek Stuff Garage Sale Facebook page.
All right. So until October 19th, I still can't find a way to end this thing.
That'll work.